I was halfway through heating leftover pasta when the first voicemail came in. My phone lit up on the counter, once, twice, then kept going like it couldn't decide whether it wanted to breathe or scream. Unknown number, then another, and another. By the time I reached for it, the counter was vibrating. Missed call, voicemail, missed call, voicemail. I remember standing there barefoot, holding a wooden spoon, staring at my phone like it had just turned into something dangerous. Because it wasn't just one message. It was a flood. And the names that started appearing in the notifications made my stomach go cold before I even pressed play. My mother, my brother, numbers I hadn't seen in 7 years. I didn't open them right away. I just stood there listening to the silence between the alerts, like the house itself was waiting to see what I would do. And then I heard my mother's voice through the speaker without even pressing anything. Somehow she'd left one already playing in the background. And the first thing she said wasn't my name. It was, "We need to talk. You don't understand what you've done." That was the moment I realized this wasn't an apology. This was something else. The strange part is I hadn't spoken to my family in 7 years. Not a call, not a text, not even a seen message. So why now? Why 43 voicemails in one night? And why did every single one sound like urgency, but not regret? And the biggest question I couldn't shake, what changed so fast that the people who erased me suddenly couldn't function without me? Before I go deeper into this, I want to know something. Where are you watching this from tonight? Because I've told this story a few times in fragments, and every time, people react differently depending on where they grew up, how they see family, loyalty, silence. If you end up staying through this, you might want to subscribe, because what happened after those voicemails wasn't just emotional. It changed the entire structure of my life. My name is Claire. I'm 32 now, and I live in a city where nobody knows my last name on purpose. That wasn't always true. 7 years ago, I lived in a small town in Pennsylvania where everybody knew everything about everyone, or at least thought they did. Back then, I wasn't Claire who left. I was Claire who caused drama at Thanksgiving. That's how my mother described it later, but I'll get to that. When I left, I had $200 in cash, one suitcase, a phone that barely worked, and a decision I didn't fully understand. Until I was already gone, I didn't plan a new life. I planned escape. I took a bus at 2:10 a.m. after Thanksgiving night, when everyone else was asleep or pretending I didn't exist in the house anymore. My brother had already posted online that I was unstable. My sister had already started talking to lawyers about family inheritance restructuring. And my father didn't say anything at all. That silence was the loudest part. I remember sitting by the bus window watching my town disappear into darkness and thinking, they'll call tomorrow. They'll realize this is too far, but tomorrow came, and nothing. Then a week, then a month, then a year where I learned something very simple. People don't look for you when it's easier to explain you away. So I rebuilt everything. I worked 3 jobs at first, then 2. Then one that actually paid enough to breathe. I stopped checking old accounts, stopped scrolling social media, stopped waiting for a version of my life that no longer existed, and slowly I became someone new, not healed, just gone. The first sign something was wrong didn't come from my family. It came from a LinkedIn notification I almost ignored, a connection request from my sister. I stared at it for a full minute without moving. 7 years of silence, and she chose LinkedIn. Not a message, not an email, just a professional networking request like we were strangers who accidentally worked in the same industry. I didn't accept it. I just let it sit there. Then a second thing happened. A friend I hadn't spoken to in years sent me a message that said only, "Hey, is your family trying to find you?" That was it. No explanation, no context. And when I asked what she meant, she never replied. That night, I checked something I hadn't touched in years, old online search results tied to my name. And I saw it, a post, from my brother, 2 days old. It said, "Some people abandon their family and still expect life to go on like normal. Funny how silence works both ways." No mention of me, but everyone who knew knew, and that's when I felt it. Not fear, not anger, something worse, interest. Because people don't post things like that unless something is shifting. The voicemails started at 6:14 p.m. I didn't know that at first. I only knew my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. I finally sat down on the couch, opened the voicemail list, and saw them stacked like dominoes. Mother, brother, unknown number, mother, sister, father, unknown number, and then again. And again. It felt organized, not emotional, structured, like someone had decided silence was no longer working. I pressed the first one. My mother's voice filled the room, not crying, not apologizing, controlled, too controlled. Claire, I know you're ignoring us, but this is not optional anymore. You need to call me back. I sat still, because that wasn't how she used to talk to me. That tone meant one thing: she needed something. The second voicemail was my brother. You always did this. Disappear, then act like the world owes you closure. It doesn't. The third was my sister. And this one was different. She sounded nervous, not emotional, nervous. Claire, please just listen. I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't know he would. It cut off. Like she stopped herself mid-sentence. I replayed it 3 times. He, not they. He. And suddenly the pattern didn't feel like family conflict anymore. It felt like damage control. I remember thinking one thing clearly: this isn't about missing me. Because people who miss you don't organize their voicemails like a coordinated system. They don't escalate. They don't sound rehearsed. And they definitely don't stop mid-sentence like they're afraid of being recorded. I leaned back on the couch and looked at my phone again. 32 missed calls now. And climbing. And I realized something I hadn't felt in years. My past wasn't behind me. It was organizing itself. At 9:03 p.m., I finally heard my father's voicemail. 7 years without his voice. And I'll be honest, I expected nothing. But what I heard wasn't anger. It wasn't even disappointment. It was something closer to panic held inside discipline. Claire, don't respond to anyone else yet. Just listen carefully. We need you to understand the situation before it escalates further. Before it escalates further. That sentence stayed in my head longer than anything else. Because it implied one thing: this wasn't already at its peak. It was still climbing. And that's when the 33rd voicemail came in. Then the 34th. Then the 35th. All within minutes. And I sat there, watching my phone like it had become a countdown I didn't start. Because whatever my family was dealing with, they weren't trying to reconnect with me. They were trying to reach me before something else did. The last thing I remember before I stopped listening was a voicemail labeled unknown number. I pressed it without thinking. A man's voice came through. Not family. Not someone I recognized, just a stranger. And he said only 4 words. They found your name. And then the call ended. My phone immediately rang again, this time my sister. I stared at it for a full 5 seconds before answering. My sister's call was still ringing when I finally picked up. I don't even know why I did. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was exhaustion. Or maybe a part of me wanted to confirm what I was already starting to feel, that whatever this was, it wasn't random anymore. The moment I answered, there was silence on her end, not the normal kind. This was heavy silence. Like she was waiting for me to speak first so she could decide what version of herself to become. Then she said my name, just once. Claire, and I noticed something immediately. Her voice wasn't emotional. It was shaken in a controlled way, like she had already cried and finished. I leaned forward slightly. Why are you calling me? I asked. Another pause. Then she said something I didn't expect. You need to tell me if what I found is real. That sentence alone changed the temperature in the room, because it wasn't how are you? It wasn't where have you been? It was verification. Like I was a file she had opened. I stood up without realizing it. Found what? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. I could hear background noise, movement, footsteps, someone breathing too close to the phone. Then she said it, slowly. Carefully, I Googled your name. That alone should have been harmless, but her tone made it feel like a confession. Then her voice cracked slightly, and I screamed. That was the first emotional break. Not mine, hers. I didn't speak. Because something about the way she said it meant I wasn't supposed to interrupt. She continued. I screamed for Mom, for Dad, for everyone. A pause, then the part that shifted everything. And within one night, you got 43 voicemails. My throat tightened slightly, but I still didn't speak, because she hadn't explained the most important part yet. Why? And then she did. Her voice lowered, not softer, more controlled. Like she was reading something she still didn't believe. And they weren't saying sorry. That sentence hit differently. I sat back down slowly. She continued. No one asked where you've been. No one asked how you've been. A breath. Then the final line. Every single voicemail was the same thing, a demand. I looked at my phone screen. The voicemail list was still open. 43 entries, stacked like evidence. I pressed one randomly. My mother's voice again. Same tone as before. Not emotional, not warm, urgent. Claire, this is not the time for whatever game you think you're playing. Call us back immediately. I pressed another, my brother. You need to stop hiding. This has gone far enough. Another, my father. We are not discussing feelings, we are discussing consequences. I stopped, because suddenly I understood what my sister meant. There was no curiosity in these messages, no concern. Only structure, like a coordinated response to a discovery, not a disappearance. A discovery. I finally spoke. What did you find online? My sister hesitated. I could hear her breathing. Then she said, It wasn't what we thought. That sentence didn't answer anything, but it confirmed everything. I pressed harder. What does that mean? Silence again. Then she whispered something that didn't sound like her. It means we didn't know what you became after you left. That word became stuck, because it implied transformation, not survival, not escape, change, and I realized something uncomfortable. They hadn't been trying to find me for 7 years. They had been ignoring me, until suddenly ignoring me was no longer possible. At 10:12 p.m., my phone started ringing again. Not one call, multiple, simultaneously. My mother, my brother, unknown numbers, then texts, then voicemail notifications stacking so fast they stopped sounding like alerts and started sounding like pressure. My sister was still on the line, and I heard her whisper, Oh my God, they're all calling her again. I asked, Why? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, When I searched your name, it wasn't just social media. Pause. It was records. Another pause. And articles. My stomach tightened. What articles? I asked. She hesitated so long I thought she'd hung up. Then she said, You didn't just disappear, Claire. My grip on the phone tightened. What do you mean? Her voice finally cracked fully now. You built something. That was the moment the entire story tilted, because I hadn't told anyone anything about my life after leaving, not even her. And yet she had found something I hadn't expected them to ever look at. Proof that I didn't just survive without them. I expanded. I existed beyond them. Her voice got faster now, like she was reliving it. When I typed your name, I thought I'd find nothing. A breath. But there were results. Another pause, and I clicked one. I didn't interrupt, because I could hear it now, the emotional shift happening in her voice. Confusion, then shock, then something close to fear. She continued, It showed your work, your name attached to things we didn't know you were capable of. I stayed silent. Then she said it, and I will never forget the exact phrasing. I screamed out loud and called Mom immediately. Her voice rose slightly, and then everything exploded. That was the moment I realized what had triggered the voicemail flood. Not missing me, not guilt, discovery, she kept going. Mom thought it was fake at first. Dad didn't believe it. My brother said it was probably someone else using your name. Then her voice dropped again. But I kept showing them. A pause. And then Mom went quiet. That silence meant more than anything she said, because my mother never went quiet unless she was recalculating reality. I asked her finally, What were they saying in the voicemails? She hesitated, then answered slowly, It's the same thing. My chest tightened slightly. What thing? Her voice went flat. Come back, we need to talk. This is not something you can ignore. I closed my eyes briefly, because I already knew no apology. No, how are you? No, we missed you. Just retrieval language, like I was something that had been misplaced. She continued, Mom sent 6, Dad sent 5, my brother, he sent more than anyone. A pause. But none of them changed. That detail mattered, because grief changes tone, anger evolves, confusion softens, but repetition means one thing, instruction. I stood up again and walked to the kitchen window. Outside, everything looked normal. Cars passing, lights on in other apartments. People living lives that didn't collapse in real time over voicemails. My sister's voice softened again. Claire, what did you do after you left? I almost laughed. Because that was the first real question she asked. 7 years too late. But before I could answer, she said something else. And why does it look like you were never gone? That question stayed in the air, because that was the truth they were struggling with. They had built a version of me that stopped existing the moment I left, a narrative where I faded, where I failed, where I needed them to function. But the internet doesn't forget people who rebuild themselves. It documents them. Quietly. Indifferently. My phone buzzed again. This time I didn't look at it immediately, because I already knew what it would be. Another voicemail, another demand, another attempt to pull me back into a version of myself they still understood. My sister's voice dropped. They're not talking anymore. What do you mean? I asked. I mean, they stopped arguing. That sounded worse than panic. I asked her, are they together? She answered, yes. That meant coordination, unified intent, not scattered reactions, a system responding to disruption. And I finally understood the shape of this night. It wasn't emotional. It was strategic. I said quietly, so they didn't miss me for 7 years. My sister didn't respond. I continued. They ignored me. Still nothing. And now they're reacting because I showed up in a way they didn't expect. That's when she finally whispered, yes. That one word changed everything, because it confirmed what I already suspected. The voicemails weren't grief. They were correction attempts. My sister suddenly said, Claire, don't answer the next call you get from them until I tell you what's actually going on. Before I could respond, I heard another call coming through. My father. And my sister's voice sharpened instantly. Don't pick up. But I was already looking at the screen. And this time I saw something I hadn't seen before. A message preview attached to the call, just 4 words. It's about the inheritance. And that was the moment everything stopped feeling like emotional family conflict and started feeling like something I had unknowingly stepped back into. It's about the inheritance. That message sat on my screen like it didn't belong in the same category as everything else. Not guilt, not emotion, not even family conflict. It felt legal, cold, structured. My father's call kept ringing in the background, but I didn't move. My sister was still on the line, her voice suddenly sharper. Claire, do not answer him yet. But I was already staring at something that didn't make sense, because I hadn't thought about inheritance in years. Not since the night I left. Not since I stopped being part of that house. And yet, somehow, that word was now sitting at the center of 43 voicemails. Not we miss you, not come home, but inheritance. That's when I realized something important. This was never about my disappearance. It was about what I left behind without knowing I left anything behind. I finally asked my sister, what inheritance? Silence, long enough that I checked if the call dropped. Then she said something carefully measured. You didn't know. That question alone told me everything, because she didn't say there is none. She didn't say it's complicated. She said, you didn't know, which meant the answer was already documented somewhere, and I was the only one not briefed. I leaned against the counter. No, I said, I didn't know anything. Another pause. Then she exhaled like she had been holding something in for years. Claire, you were never told the full arrangement. My stomach tightened slightly. What arrangement? And that's when I heard it, a shift in her tone. Like she had just crossed into something she wasn't supposed to explain. She said, Dad structured everything years ago. I frowned. That doesn't involve me. It did, she replied immediately, too fast, too certain. Then she corrected herself. It was supposed to. That sentence didn't land cleanly. It hung, because supposed to always means interruption, failure, or removal. I asked again, slower now. What exactly was supposed to include me? She hesitated, then said, You were named in it. That was the first real crack in the story I had lived with for 7 years, because I had left believing I was the disposable one, the dramatic one, the unstable one, not someone written into financial structure. My father's call stopped ringing, and immediately my phone lit up again. Another voicemail, then another, then 3 more stacked instantly. My sister went quiet mid-call, then whispered, They're all together now, I asked. Where? At home. That word hit harder than expected, because I hadn't heard home attached to me in years, and suddenly I understood. They weren't just reacting to me. They were reacting inside a physical space where my name was now a problem again. My sister spoke faster. Claire, listen to me carefully. When I searched your name, it wasn't just public posts. It was linked records. I frowned. What records? She lowered her voice. Property filings. That stopped me completely. She continued, almost breathless now. I didn't even know what I was looking at first. It just showed your name connected to a legal listing. I said nothing, because I already felt where this was going. And I clicked it, she said, and I thought it was a mistake. Her voice tightened. But it wasn't. A pause. Then the part she had been circling since part 1 finally landed. You're listed in the estate structure, Claire. Silence. Not from her, from me. Because my brain didn't process it immediately. Estate structure. That wasn't emotional language. That was legal language, and legal language means intention, design, ownership. She continued, and when I showed Mom, her voice broke slightly, everything changed. I sat down again, slowly, because now the shape of everything was starting to form. My sister kept talking, but her tone had shifted into something closer to shock recollection. Mom thought it was fake at first. She said it had to be an error. A pause. Then I showed her again. Another pause, and again. Her breathing became uneven. And then she stopped talking. I asked quietly, what did she realize? And this is where everything snapped into place. My sister said, that you didn't disappear. A breath. You removed yourself before anything could be finalized. That sentence didn't make sense at first, so I asked, finalized? Her voice dropped. The inheritance transfer. And suddenly everything clicked. The structure, the silence, the voicemails, the urgency without emotion, the demand without apology. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because my absence had interrupted something that required my presence. I pressed another voicemail. My mother again, same tone. Claire, this needs to be handled immediately. This is not optional. My brother, stop avoiding this. You know exactly what you're doing. My father, we cannot proceed without your confirmation. I stopped the playback, because now I could hear it clearly. Every message had the same structure, not emotional language, not reunion language, procedural language. My sister spoke softly. They all thought you knew. That sentence hit differently, because it explained the anger, the frustration, the entitlement. They weren't reacting to abandonment. They were reacting to interruption of expectation. I stood up again and walked toward the window. Outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. My sister asked, Claire, did you ever sign anything before you left? I thought about it, then answered honestly. No. That silence on the other end lasted longer than anything before it. Then she said, then you're still legally attached. And that was the moment I felt something shift inside my chest. Not fear, not confusion, control. Because now I understood why they had gone from silence for 7 years to 43 voicemails in one night. Something had activated, and I was the missing key. My sister finally said it plainly. They can't complete anything without you, I asked. Complete what? She didn't answer immediately, then said, I don't think I'm supposed to explain that part. That sentence told me more than anything else, because it confirmed. This wasn't just family drama. This was structure locked behind consent, and my absence had frozen it. 7 years of silence hadn't erased me. It had paused something. And now that I had been found, it was trying to resume. My phone buzzed again, my father, still calling, still persistent, but now I didn't feel pulled toward it. I felt detached. My sister said, Claire, whatever you do next, don't let them push you into responding fast. I asked, why? And she paused before answering. Because they're not thinking emotionally right now. A beat. They're thinking urgently. That distinction mattered. Because urgency without emotion means one thing, resolution pressure, not reconciliation. Then my sister said something that made my entire body go still. I think they thought you would come back eventually. I didn't respond. She continued. And when you didn't, they probably assumed you were still reachable through normal means. A pause. But you weren't. Another pause. And now they've realized you're not just absent. Her voice dropped. You're independent of them. That was the real breaking point, because systems don't panic over missing people. They panic over non-dependent variables. My father's call stopped, and immediately a new voicemail came in. Unknown number, but this time it wasn't my family. It was a woman's voice I had never heard before. Calm, professional, measured, and she said, "Miss Claire, this is regarding your signature requirement on the estate file. We need to schedule a formal review immediately." I looked at my sister's call still active, then at my phone, then back at the voicemail, and I finally asked the only question that mattered. "Who else knows I exist in this file?" My sister answered quietly, "Everyone who wants it resolved." The woman on the voicemail didn't sound emotional at all. That's the first thing that hit me. No hesitation, no curiosity, no "is this the right number?" Just straight into it. "Miss Claire, this is regarding the estate file tied to your name. We need to schedule a formal review." Estate file. I remember actually laughing a little under my breath, like my brain refused to connect that word to me, because I didn't sign anything. I didn't agree to anything. I didn't even know there was anything. My sister was still on the call, breathing quietly on the other end like she was waiting to see if I'd break or respond or hang up. I finally said, "Why is a lawyer calling me?" And she answered immediately, way too fast, "Because they found you." That sentence landed wrong, like I wasn't a person they contacted, like I was something they recovered. My sister spoke lower now. "Claire, you're gonna hate this part." I said, "Just say it." She hesitated. Then, "This didn't start when you left." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She sighed like she'd been holding it in too long. "Dad started planning it years before you walked out." I leaned back on the couch. "Planning what?" And she said it like it was obvious. "The inheritance split." I didn't even respond right away, because that part alone didn't make sense. Inheritance usually means someone is gone, dead, retired, not someone sitting in an apartment eating cold pasta at 10 p.m. I said, "So I was included in something I never even knew about," she replied. "Yeah," then added quickly, "Technically, yes." That technically mattered more than anything else she said so far. She kept going, and her voice sounded different now, less careful, more honest. "Look, in the beginning it was supposed to be simple. Dad had assets, house, some investments, nothing crazy rich but enough that he wanted it structured." I cut in. "Structured how?" she exhaled. "Equal split, all of us, you, me, him." I froze a bit. "Then what changed?" And there was a pause before she answered. "You did." I laughed again, but not because it was funny. "Me, I didn't even know this existed." "I know," she said quickly. "I know that now." Then she added, "But at the time, after certain things happened, they thought you were unstable enough that it would complicate things legally." That word again. Unstable. I'd heard that my whole life in different tones, but this time it wasn't emotional. It was paperwork language, like someone had written it into justification. I stood up and started pacing without thinking. "Okay," I said, "so let me get this straight. I was part of some inheritance plan I never knew about, and then I left, and now suddenly everyone's panicking." My sister replied, "It's not that simple." I said, "It kinda is." And she went quiet for a second. Then, "When you left, they couldn't finalize anything." I stopped walking. "What does finalize mean?" She hesitated. Then, "It means distribution, signing off, legal closure." I laughed again, but shorter this time. "So my disappearance broke paperwork?" She didn't like that phrasing. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" I asked. And she finally said, "It's like your name is still active in the system." That made me pause. Not because it sounded dramatic, because it sounded stupidly bureaucratic, like something you'd hear in a bank office. My phone buzzed again. Same number. I almost didn't answer. My sister said quickly, "Don't ignore that, just pick it up. But don't agree to anything." So I did. "Hello." Same calm voice from the voicemail. "Miss Claire, thank you for answering." I said, "Yeah, I got your message. What is this about exactly?" She replied like she had done this 100 times. "You are listed as a required party in a pending estate resolution. Your signature is needed to proceed." I blinked. I didn't even know I was in any estate. There was a pause. Then she said, "That is exactly why we are contacting you now." I looked at my sister on the other line. She mouthed, "Don't argue," I said into the phone. "So what happens if I don't sign anything?" The lawyer didn't hesitate. "Then the file remains unresolved indefinitely." Indefinitely. That word finally made it real. Not emotional, not dramatic, just stuck. Frozen because of me. My sister suddenly said, "They're freaking out right now." I said, "Who is they exactly?" She answered, "Mom, Dad, and your brother are in the living room arguing with the attorney." I stopped. "Wait, the lawyer is at your house." "Yes." That changed the entire thing, because now this wasn't messages anymore. This was physical presence, real confrontation. I said, "So they didn't just start calling me, they brought someone to them." My sister replied, "Yeah, once they saw your name pop up in the records, they didn't want to wait." That told me everything. They weren't trying to reconnect. They were trying to fix something immediately, like damage control, not emotion. I leaned against the kitchen counter. "Why didn't anyone just tell me this years ago?" I asked. My sister went quiet again, then, "Because you weren't supposed to leave like that." I said, "I didn't leave like anything, I just left." She corrected me softly, "You left before it was finished." That sentence sat there for a second. Then she added, "And after you left, nobody wanted to be the one to explain it." I said, "So instead they just called me unstable." She didn't deny it. That silence answered enough. Something started clicking in my head now, not anger. Not sadness, just pattern recognition. I said, "So let me guess. The inheritance thing is split between all of you, but my signature or approval is needed because I'm still listed." My sister said, "Yes." I continued. "And nobody bothered fixing it for 7 years because I was the scapegoat and nobody cared enough to track me down." She hesitated. Then, "Basically, yeah." That was the first honest sentence in a while. No soft language, no filtering. Just truth in plain words. The lawyer spoke again. "Miss Claire, I need to clarify something important." I said, "Go ahead." She continued, "This is not a small inheritance matter. There are multiple linked accounts and property transfers tied to your legal identity." I frowned. "My identity?" "Yes," she said. "Your name is attached to multiple pending structures." I looked at my sister again, and she looked away this time. That was the first time she didn't want to meet my eyes, even through a phone call. I said slowly, "So I'm not just a signature." The lawyer replied, "No, you are a required authorization point." I almost laughed again. "Okay, I'm starting to sound like paperwork instead of a person." The lawyer didn't respond to that. She just said, "We will need you to schedule verification." After the call ended, there was silence. Not just on my end. Even my sister didn't speak right away. Then she said quietly, "Claire, they didn't think you'd ever show up in the system again." I asked, "So what happens now?" And she answered honestly, "Now they have to deal with you being real again." And before I could respond, my phone lit up again. Unknown number. New voicemail. But this time, the preview line wasn't from family. It said, "We will need you to come in person." And that's where it stopped feeling like old family dramas and started feeling like something that had been waiting for me to come back without me even knowing it was there. I didn't even finish reading the voicemail preview before there was a knock at my door. Not the kind you ignore. Not the maybe it's a delivery guy knock. This one had weight to it. 2 sharp hits. Pause, then another. My phone was still in my hand. My sister was still on the call. And she said immediately, voice tight, "Don't open it yet." I stared at the door. "Who is it?" I asked. No answer from the other side, just another knock, same rhythm, controlled. Like whoever it was already knew I was inside. My sister said, "Claire, it's probably them." And I said something I didn't expect myself to say out loud. "After 7 years, they couldn't even call first." Another knock, this time louder. I walked closer to the door slowly. My sister's voice got sharper. Wait, don't just open it like that." I said, "I'm not opening it like anything, I just want to see who it is." I looked through the peephole, and I saw my mother, standing there like she belonged, not emotional, not crying, just dressed like this was a scheduled meeting she expected to win. Behind her was my brother, and slightly behind them, a man in a suit I didn't recognize. My sister whispered, "Is the lawyer there?" I said, "Yeah." Silence on the call, then she said, "Okay, this just got worse." I opened the door halfway, not fully, just enough. Cold air hit my face immediately. My mother looked at me like I had walked out yesterday instead of 7 years ago. No smile, no shock, just immediate words. "There you are." like I had been late. Not gone, I said. Why are you here? She ignored the question. That was her thing. Instead, she said, you need to come with us. I blinked. No, my brother stepped forward slightly. Don't start that again. I looked at him. Start what? He said. This attitude. I actually laughed once. My attitude? You haven't seen me in 7 years and you're already diagnosing me again. The lawyer cleared his throat behind them. Let's keep this civil. My mother didn't even look at him. She just said, this is not something you handle over the phone. I said, funny, you handled ignoring me over 7 years just fine over silence. That hit something, not emotional, structural. My brother's jaw tightened. The lawyer finally stepped forward. Miss Claire, I need to confirm identity and proceed with formal notification. My mother interrupted him immediately. She already knows what this is about. I turned to him. I don't. Nobody has actually explained anything clearly. My brother muttered, of course she's doing this. I looked at him. Doing what? He said, acting like she doesn't know. That's when I realized something. They weren't confused. They were convinced I was pretending. My sister suddenly spoke in my ear through the phone. Claire, ask them why they're panicking. I said out loud, why are you all here right now? Silence. Then my mother said, because you're holding this up. That was the first honest sentence she said. The lawyer pulled out a folder. I think we should explain the situation properly. My mother finally looked at him. Finally, he opened it. Miss Claire is listed as a required signatory for final inheritance distribution. My brother cut in. She's been listed for years. The lawyer continued. However, due to her absence and lack of confirmation, the file has remained incomplete. My mother snapped. Because she left. I said, I didn't leave a legal system behind. That made my brother scoff. You left everything behind. I looked at him. No, I left you behind. That silence again. My mother stepped forward slightly. Don't rewrite history. I said calmly. I'm not rewriting anything. I'm asking why nobody thought to contact me properly for 7 years if this was so important. The lawyer answered before they could. We attempted standard contact methods. I raised an eyebrow. Standard, he nodded. Yes, registered mail, email, listed emergency contacts. I looked at my mother. You mean all the stuff you could have told me about? She didn't answer. That told me everything. My sister spoke quietly through the phone. Claire, they never updated your contact info. I said. So they just let it sit. My brother said. We didn't think it mattered. That was the first time something actually landed emotionally. Not because it hurt, because it exposed the mindset. I said, you didn't think I mattered. My mother immediately replied, that's not what I said. I nodded slowly. But it's what you did. Silence. The lawyer looked uncomfortable now, like he had stepped into something that wasn't just paperwork anymore. Something in me changed, not dramatic, just clear. I said, so let me get this straight. I leave. You all assume I don't matter enough to actively track. Then suddenly I show up in your system again and now I'm the urgent problem. My brother said, it's not like that. I looked at him. It literally is. My mother said quickly, this is about legal closure. I laughed slightly. No, this is about inconvenience. That made her pause, because I wasn't emotional anymore. I was just observing. The lawyer finally spoke clearly. If Miss Claire does not sign, the estate distribution cannot proceed, and assets remain frozen under legal hold. My mother immediately turned to me. You see, my father finally spoke from behind her, calm but heavy. We need this resolved. I looked at him. After 7 years, that was his first real sentence to me. Not how are you, not where have you been. Just, we need this resolved. I said quietly, so that's it. My brother said. What? I looked at all of them. I was never the missing daughter to you. I was just the missing signature. That landed differently. Nobody spoke. The lawyer said, legally, Miss Claire is within her rights to review all documents before signing. My mother immediately reacted. There's nothing to review. That's not how documents work. She waved it off. This is family property. I said, no, it's legal property. That's why he's here. The lawyer nodded slightly. My brother muttered, this is ridiculous. That was the real signal. I finally understood something I hadn't before. For 7 years, they didn't chase me, because they thought they didn't have to. Now they did. I stepped back slightly from the door and said, "I'm not signing anything today." My mother's face tightened immediately. "What?" I repeated calmly. "I'm not signing anything today." My brother stepped forward. "You're seriously doing this now?" I looked at him. "I didn't start anything, I just stopped disappearing." Silence again. Then the lawyer said softly, "That is your right." My mother turned sharply. "Excuse me," but I didn't look at her anymore. I just said, "If I'm part of this system, then I want to see all of it." And for the first time since they arrived, nobody had a fast answer. Not my mother, not my brother, not even the lawyer. And behind me, my sister on the phone whispered, "Claire, careful. Once you open that file completely, there's no going back to how they've been telling the story." And that's where everything stopped being about inheritance and started becoming about what they had been hiding inside it the whole time. The lawyer said one sentence that changed the entire energy outside my door. "Full access will require all parties to agree." My mother immediately stepped forward. "No, absolutely not." I looked at her. "So you want me to sign something I can't even see properly?" My brother cut in fast. "You don't need to see everything, you just need to sign." That line did it. Not anger, clarity. Because nobody says that unless they've already decided what your role is supposed to be. My sister was still on the phone, whispering like she was watching it happen in real time. "Claire, don't let them rush you," I said out loud. "I'm not signing anything I can't read." My mother let out a sharp breath. "This is exactly what we're talking about, this behavior." I looked at her. "What behavior?" She didn't answer that directly. Instead, she said, "You always make things complicated." That word again. Complicated. Not wrong, not right, just inconvenient. The lawyer flipped a page in his folder. "There's also an issue of prior classification." My brother immediately interrupted. "We already explained that." The lawyer didn't look at him. He looked at me. "Miss Claire, according to earlier family submissions, you were classified as a dependent beneficiary with conditional standing." I frowned. "What does that even mean?" My mother answered fast. "It just means you were included, but with conditions." I looked at her. "What conditions?" She hesitated. That hesitation mattered. My sister suddenly whispered, "She doesn't want to answer that." And for the first time, I realized something simple. They weren't hiding money from me. They were hiding the reason I was labeled that way in the first place. The lawyer continued. "There are documented notes attached to your classification." I said, "Notes from who?" He answered, "Family submissions." My brother shifted uncomfortably. My mother said quickly, "That was years ago, it's irrelevant." I said, "No, it's literally the only thing I'm being judged on right now." My father finally stepped forward slightly from behind them. "Claire, this isn't about judgment." I looked at him. "What is it about then?" He paused. And that pause told me more than any document could. Then he said, "It was about stability at the time." My sister whispered into the phone. "Oh my God," I said out loud. "So I was labeled unstable in your paperwork and nobody ever told me." My brother said immediately, "You were going through things." I looked at him. "Like what?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, "You know what I mean." That sentence always means, "We all agreed on a version of you and stopped questioning it." The lawyer turned a page again. "There are references to behavioral concerns." I blinked. "Behavioral concerns?" My mother jumped in. "That was a long time ago." I said, "Explain it." She hesitated. My father said quietly, "It was during your college period." I stared at him. "And," my brother added, "there were incidents." I laughed once. "Incidents like what? I forgot to text you back." My mother snapped. "Don't minimize it." That was the first time she showed real emotion, not sadness, control panic. The lawyer spoke again. "These notes affected your classification in the estate structure." I turned toward him. "So I wasn't just included, I was rated." He didn't correct me. That silence again. I stepped slightly away from the door. And something clicked that I didn't expect. It wasn't about inheritance anymore. It was about narrative. I said slowly, "So let me get this straight." Nobody spoke. I continued. "You all created a version of me that explained why I wasn't included in decisions." My mother said quickly, "That's not fair." I looked at her. "Then what is it?" She hesitated, and I kept going. You didn't want a conversation. You wanted a reason. My brother muttered. That's not true. I turned to him. Then why does none of this match my actual life? Silence. Because that's the part they couldn't answer. Not because they didn't know. Because they had already committed to a version of me that made everything easier. My sister spoke quietly into the phone. Claire, I think they built a story around you after you left. I said. They didn't build it after I left. I looked at my mother. They were already building it while I was still there. That hit differently. My mother's face tightened. That's not what happened, I said calmly. Then explain why there are notes about me that I never saw. No answer. My father finally spoke. We were trying to manage things. I looked at him. Manage me, he corrected quickly. Manage the situation. That word again. Situation, not daughter, not person. Situation. The lawyer cleared his throat. Legally speaking, none of the internal family notes determine your rights. They only affect procedural classification. My mother immediately turned to him. Then why bring them up? He answered honestly. Because Miss Claire is asking to see everything. That sentence changed the dynamic again, because now it wasn't family arguing. It was transparency versus control. And I was the reason it was cracking open. My brother stepped closer to me. Claire, you're turning this into something it's not. I looked at him. What is it then? He said. It's paperwork, that's it. I nodded slowly. Then why does it feel like I'm the only missing piece that holds it together? Silence. My mother said, You're making it emotional. I laughed slightly. No, I'm making it visible. That landed harder than anything else I said. Because that was the difference. They wanted control through silence. I was breaking it just by asking questions. My sister suddenly said, Claire, they're not used to you responding like this. I said, What did they expect? She hesitated. Then, that you just sign and move on. I looked at the door. And go back to being invisible. She didn't answer, because that was the truth nobody wanted to say out loud. The lawyer closed the folder slightly. Miss Claire, if you wish to proceed, we can schedule full document review. My mother immediately said, No, that's not necessary. I turned to her. It is for me. She stepped closer. You're overthinking this. I said quietly. I've been underthinking it for 7 years. That stopped her. Not completely, but enough. The lawyer added, We would need your presence in person at the office to proceed with full disclosure. My sister whispered in my ear, Claire, if you go in there, you're going to see everything they never told you. I looked at all of them standing there. My family, the lawyer, the silence behind their urgency, and I finally said, Then book it. And for the first time since the door opened, nobody tried to talk me out of it immediately. Not my mother, not my brother, not even my father. Because now they all understood the same thing at the same time. I wasn't just signing anymore. I was about to read the version of my life they had been using without me. The lawyer's office didn't feel like anything dramatic. That's what threw me off first. No tension in the air, no chaos. Just a quiet room, a long table, and a stack of folders sitting exactly where they were supposed to be. Like this kind of situation happens every day. My mother, father, and brother were already there when I walked in. No one spoke at first, not even a hi. Just eyes following me like I was late to something they had already decided the outcome of. The lawyer pushed a folder toward the center of the table. Before we proceed, you're entitled to review the full file. My mother immediately said, This isn't necessary. I looked at her. It is for me. And for the first time, she didn't respond immediately. That pause told me everything. My brother leaned back in his chair. Just sign after you look at it. That's all this is. I looked at him. You're very confident for someone who hasn't let me read a single page yet. He didn't answer. The lawyer slid the folder closer to me. Everything used in classification decisions is here. That word again. Classification. Like I wasn't being described. Like I was being sorted. I opened the folder and immediately realized something strange. There wasn't one document. There were many, too many, stapled reports, notes, typed summaries, handwritten comments in the margins. My name was on every page, but not the version of me I recognized. The first page was labeled, Behavioral Summary Family Assessment File. I frowned. What is this? I asked. My father answered carefully. It's just internal documentation. I read the first line out loud. Subject displays emotional volatility under stress and inconsistent communication patterns. I looked up. Emotional volatility, my mother said quickly. That was taken out of context. I kept reading. Second line. Subject has previously withdrawn from family discussions without resolution. I paused, then looked at them. This is about me not answering arguments I didn't want to have, my brother said. You always shut down conversations. I leaned back slightly. I left the room. That's shutting down conversations now. No answer. The lawyer cleared his throat softly. You may continue reviewing. I flipped the page. Another section. Risk classification, medium dependency concern. I actually laughed a little. Dependency concern, I said. On who? My mother responded quickly. That's not how it reads. I looked at her. It literally says dependency. My father spoke calmly. It was about family structure. I nodded slowly. So I was the problem in the structure? My brother leaned forward slightly. You were unpredictable. I looked at him. When? He hesitated. That hesitation again. Then, during college and after. I kept reading. Another note. Subject may require monitored financial transition support in future inheritance distribution. I stopped. Monitored, the lawyer said carefully. That refers to conditional oversight clauses. I looked up. You put me under oversight without telling me? No one answered immediately, because there was no version of that sentence that sounded acceptable out loud. I closed the folder halfway, not because I was done, because I needed a second. Then I said, so let me understand something clearly. I looked at all three of them. You didn't just say I was unstable emotionally. Pause. You wrote it down. My mother replied quickly. It was for legal protection. I said. From what? Silence. That silence again. I continued. From me, my father finally said. From misunderstanding. I looked at him. That's a very soft word for what this actually is. I flipped another page. This one had a timeline, dates, events, notes attached to years I clearly remembered differently. I read one out loud. Subject left family gathering without notice following disagreement regarding financial expectations. I looked up. That was me leaving after being insulted at dinner. My brother said immediately, that's not what happened. I stared at him. It literally is what happened. He leaned forward. You're exaggerating it. That word again, exaggerating. The favorite way to erase context without calling someone a liar. I closed the folder fully this time and said, none of this is about accuracy. My mother frowned. What are you talking about? I looked at the paper stack. This is about agreement. The lawyer finally spoke more directly. Miss Clare is correct in one aspect. These documents reflect internal consensus, not independent verification. I looked at him. Meaning, he answered. They were not required to be fact-checked externally. My head tilted slightly. So it's just what you all agreed on about me. My father said. That's not fair. I looked at him. Neither is being labeled a risk profile without knowing it. My mother stepped in quickly. We were trying to protect the family assets. I said calmly. From me. No one responded to that, because it wasn't emotional anymore. It was structural. I opened the folder again slowly, and I said, so this is why you panicked when you found me online. My brother said, it's not panic. I looked at him. It is. He didn't argue. I continued. You didn't think I disappeared. Pause. You thought I stayed out of reach. My mother said, that's not the same thing. I nodded slightly. It is when you need me to sign something. That hit harder than anything else I had said. I closed the folder completely, then pushed it back slightly. I'm not signing anything today. My mother's face tightened immediately. Claire, don't start this again. I looked at her. This isn't starting. Pause. This is me stopping. My father leaned forward. We need resolution. I looked at him. You need resolution. That correction mattered, because for the first time I wasn't inside their framing anymore. The lawyer adjusted the folder. There is one additional document you have not reviewed yet. My mother reacted instantly. That's not necessary. I looked at him. What is it? He paused slightly, then said, it's the original inheritance intent letter. My brother went quiet immediately. My father looked away for the first time, and my mother said, no. Just that. No. And whatever that last document was the part they had been actively trying to keep out of my hands since the moment I walked into that room. And the lawyer slowly placed it on the table, without opening it, just sliding it toward me, waiting. The second that envelope touched the table, something in the room changed. Not dramatic, not loud, just quieter. Like everyone in the room had agreed without speaking that this was the part we weren't supposed to reach. My mother said it first. "No, that's not relevant." My father didn't look at it. My brother leaned back like he didn't want to be anywhere near it, and I just stared at it. Same paper, same folder style, nothing special on the outside. But somehow it felt heavier than everything I had read before it. The lawyer didn't open it. He just said, "This is the original intent document tied to the estate structure." I looked at him. "And why wasn't this in the first folder?" He paused. "Because it was flagged as sensitive." My mother cut in fast. "It's outdated." I nodded slowly. "That's funny because everything else in there is still being used against me." No one answered that. I finally reached for it. My mother immediately said, "Claire, don't." I stopped my hand midair and looked at her. That was the first time she looked nervous since I walked in. Not angry, not controlling, nervous, I asked. "Why?" She hesitated. My brother said quickly, "It's not important anymore." I looked at him. "That's not how secrets work." Then I picked it up and opened it. The first line wasn't legal jargon. It was a sentence written in plain language. "This structure assumes full cooperation of all named beneficiaries during active estate management." I frowned. "This doesn't even sound like me." My father shifted in his chair. "Keep reading." I did. Second paragraph. "In the event of voluntary separation of any beneficiary, their standing may be reassessed under dependency stability review." I looked up. "Voluntary separation," my mother said quickly. "You left." I stared at her. "I left my life, not a legal contract I never saw." No response. I kept reading, and then I saw it. A section labeled, "Dependency Reclassification Clause." I said it out loud. "What is dependency reclassification?" The lawyer answered carefully. "It allows adjustment of beneficiary roles based on perceived long-term reliability." I blinked. "So I was adjustable," my brother muttered. "That sounds worse than it is." I looked at him. "No, it sounds exactly what it is." My mother said, "This was to protect assets from instability." I looked at her. "Instability or me making decisions you didn't agree with?" She didn't answer that directly, which was answer enough. I flipped deeper into the document, and there it was, a paragraph with multiple handwritten notes beside it, not just typed. Written, different handwriting, different years. My father's voice got lower. "You don't need to read that part." I looked at him. "That's usually the part I need to read." And I read it anyway. "Subject demonstrated repeated refusal to align with family-directed financial expectations following adulthood transition period." I laughed slightly. "That's a very long way of saying I didn't do what you wanted." My brother snapped. "That's not what it means." I looked at him. "Then explain it." He didn't. I turned another page, and I stopped, because this one had something different. A summary note, stamped, official. It read, "Recommend conditional exclusion from primary inheritance execution unless reconciliation agreement is established." I looked up slowly. "Reconciliation agreement," my mother said quickly. "That was just a legal term." I nodded. "So me coming back and behaving how you want me to behave?" Silence. That silence again, I said. "So I wasn't just removed emotionally. I was removed conditionally." No one corrected me, because there was no softer version of that sentence. I leaned back in my chair slightly and said, "So let me get this straight." I looked at all of them. "You didn't erase me." Pause. "You paused me," my father said. "That's not accurate." I looked at him. "It literally is written here." He didn't respond. I continued. "And then you waited for me to behave in a way that would let you unpause me." My brother said, "That's not how it works." I looked at him. "Then why am I still in the system?" Silence. Because that was the question nobody had prepared for. The lawyer finally spoke again. "Legally speaking, the structure requires active acknowledgement for resolution." My mother snapped. "Exactly." But he continued. However, absence does not remove entitlement. That sentence hit differently. My father finally looked directly at the lawyer. "What are you saying?" The lawyer replied calmly. "I'm saying Miss Clare still holds a full legal position regardless of classification notes." My brother muttered. "So none of this mattered," the lawyer said. "It mattered for interpretation, not ownership." And suddenly I saw it clearly. All the labels, all the notes, all the judgment, it didn't remove my place. It just tried to shape how I was treated inside it. I closed the document slowly and said, "So all this time you weren't trying to include me." Pause. "You were trying to qualify me," my mother said. "That's not fair." I looked at her. "It's not emotional, it's literal." My brother said, "You're twisting this." I looked at him. "I'm reading it." That shut him down immediately, because there was nothing left to argue against. The paper was doing that for me. "This is the final clause tied to execution approval." My mother immediately said, "No, that's not necessary." I just said, "Read it." The lawyer hesitated, then turned it around and read out loud. "Final distribution cannot proceed without acknowledgement from all named beneficiaries, including Miss Clare, whose absence does not nullify requirement." He looked up. "So in short, nothing moves without you." Silence. Not emotional, not dramatic, just structural truth landing in the room. And for the first time, my mother didn't have a response ready, because now even she understood something she had been avoiding saying out loud for years. I wasn't the problem in the system. I was the missing switch that kept it from working, and the lawyer gently closed the folder. My mother finally broke it. "This is ridiculous. This can't be what it sounds like." I looked at her. It sounded pretty clear. My brother leaned forward. "You're making it bigger than it is." I laughed once, but it came out flat. "I'm not making anything bigger. I'm just reading what you all already signed." That hit him wrong, because for the first time there was no confusion left to hide behind. My father finally spoke, slower than before. "Claire, this is just procedure." I looked at him. "Then why does it feel like I'm the only missing piece that makes it work?" No one answered. The lawyer adjusted his papers slightly. "There is still one unresolved requirement." My mother immediately jumped in. "We can resolve it right now." I looked at her. "No, we can't," she frowned. "Why not?" I said. "Because I haven't even decided what I'm looking at yet." My brother scoffed. "It's inheritance paperwork, that's it." I turned to him. "Then why does it mention my behavior from 10 years ago like it's evidence in court?" He didn't respond. The lawyer spoke again. "Miss Clare has the right to request full audit context before any signature is made." My mother said sharply, "There's nothing else to show her." The lawyer didn't react to her tone. He just said, "Actually, there is." And that's when everything shifted again. The lawyer pulled out a separate thin file, not thick like the others, smaller, clean. My father's posture changed immediately. "Where did that come from?" the lawyer replied. "It's part of the original advisory notes." My mother's voice tightened. "That's not supposed to be included." I looked at her. "Not supposed to be included for who?" No answer. The lawyer opened it. "This contains the initial reasoning behind beneficiary classification adjustments." I leaned forward slightly. "Translation," he looked at me. "It explains why changes were made to your standing." My brother muttered. "This is unnecessary." I looked at him. "It's only unnecessary because it's about me." The lawyer read the first line. "Recommendation initiated following repeated family conflict events impacting financial decision alignment." I frowned. "What conflict events?" My mother jumped in quickly. "That's not how it happened." I looked at her. "Then how did it happen?" She hesitated. That hesitation again. My father said quietly, "There were disagreements." I nodded. "Okay." Then I looked at the lawyer. "Disagreements like what?" He flipped a page. "Instances include refusal to comply with proposed financial restructuring during adult transition phase." I blinked. "Adult transition phase?" My brother sighed. "That was when you were being difficult." I turned to him. "Difficult how?" he said. "You just didn't cooperate." I nodded slowly. "So not agreeing was the problem." No response. That silence again. I leaned back, and something started to annoy me, not emotionally, but logically. Because I was hearing two stories, their version. I was unstable, non-cooperative, my memory. I left arguments I didn't want, those don't match. I said, so every time I didn't agree with something, it became a behavioral note. My mother said quickly, that's not what happened. I looked at her. It's literally documented. The lawyer added quietly, these are internal summaries, not emotional interpretations. My brother muttered, they were just trying to keep things organized. I looked at him. Organized from what? Me, no answer. I looked down at the papers again, and for the first time I didn't feel confused. I felt something worse. Understanding, I said, you didn't just disagree with me. Pause. You documented me like a problem to be managed. My father said, that's not fair. I looked at him. I didn't write this. Silence, because that was the difference. They could argue memory, they couldn't argue paperwork. The lawyer turned one page carefully. There is also an earlier reference that predates most classifications. My mother's face tightened. Why are you bringing that up? He ignored her. And read. Initial concern raised following subject's decision to independently relocate and sever financial dependency structure. I paused, then looked up. That's me leaving. He nodded. Yes, my brother said immediately. You didn't just leave. You disappeared. I looked at him. I left a house, not a legal system, the lawyer added, but the system treated it as disengagement from obligations. That word again, obligations, not relationship, not family, obligations. I closed the smaller file, slowly, and said, so this entire thing, I looked at them, is built on the idea that I was supposed to stay available for your decisions. My mother said, that's not what it is. I looked at her. It is exactly what it is. My brother said, you're rewriting it. I shook my head. I'm reading it without your commentary. That made him quiet. My father finally spoke again. Claire, you're taking this too personally. I looked at him. That's funny. I didn't see my name anywhere in these documents that says I'm allowed to take it personally. That hit differently, because for the first time, they didn't have a response ready. The lawyer closed the file gently. We should pause here. My mother immediately said, no, but nobody listened to her, not even my brother this time. I stood up slightly, not leaving, just adjusting, and said, so what happens if I refuse to sign anything at all? The lawyer looked at me. Then nothing changes legally. My mother snapped, that's not acceptable. I turned to her. That's not my problem anymore. Silence. Then my father said something quieter than everything else he had said so far. Then we can't finish this. I looked at him, and for the first time in this entire process, I asked something simple. Finish what? No one answered immediately, because now even they had to admit, whatever this was had been running longer than I ever knew I was part of it. And the only reason it was still alive was because I was standing right there. My father finally said it like he was tired of holding it in. This isn't about inheritance anymore. That line made the room feel different instantly. My mother turned toward him. Yes, it is. Don't complicate this. My brother added quickly. She's doing that thing again, making it emotional. But nobody looked at me when they said it this time. That was new, because earlier I was the center of the argument. Now I was something else. A variable they couldn't agree on anymore. I said quietly, then what is it about? No one answered right away. Even the lawyer hesitated this time. And that silence told me everything before anyone spoke. The lawyer finally spoke. It's about closure of a long-standing estate dependency loop. My mother immediately snapped. No, don't phrase it like that. I looked at her. Then how should it be phrased? She hesitated. And for the first time, she didn't have a polished answer. My father said quietly, it was never meant to stay open this long. I asked, because of me? No one answered directly. That was the answer. The lawyer adjusted his papers. Without Miss Claire's authorization, final distribution cannot be executed, and control reverts to pre-established holding conditions. I frowned. Control reverts to who? My brother shifted uncomfortably. That's not important. I looked at him. It sounds pretty important. My mother said quickly, it's just legal structure, don't overthink it. I nodded slowly. So I'm the only reason it hasn't moved forward. The lawyer said calmly, yes, that one word changed the entire atmosphere, because now it wasn't unclear anymore. It was simple. My brother stood up slightly. This is ridiculous, just sign it and move on. I looked at him. And if I don't? He hesitated. My mother stepped in fast. Then we're stuck like this forever. That line was interesting. Not emotional, not legal, just frustration. My father finally spoke again. Claire, nobody planned for it to stay unresolved this long, I said. Then maybe don't build systems that depend on someone who doesn't know they're part of them. Silence. That one landed harder than anything before. I looked at the folder again, and everything clicked differently now. Not emotional. Structural, I said, so let me get this straight. Pause. I don't just get money or don't get money. I looked at the lawyer. I unlock it. He nodded slightly. Yes, my mother said quickly. That's not how it works. I looked at her. It literally is how it works. No response, because now even arguing felt pointless. My sister's voice came through the phone softly. Claire, they didn't expect you to read everything. I said. Yeah, I noticed. My brother muttered. This is getting out of hand. I turned to him. It's been out of hand for 7 years. You just didn't feel it until now. That shut him up, not emotionally, just factually. The lawyer closed the file. Legally speaking, Miss Claire's signature is required only for completion, not for ownership. My mother said sharply, then just explain that. He looked at her. I have, multiple times. My father leaned back slightly. So she doesn't lose anything if she refuses? The lawyer replied. No. That was the first moment I saw a real panic shift across my mother's face. Not emotional panic, control panic, because that meant something simple. I wasn't trapped. I was just holding the system open. I stood up, not fast, not dramatic, just calm, and said, so I'm not the problem in this system. Pause. I'm just the last missing input. My mother immediately said, don't say it like that. I looked at her. How should I say it? She didn't answer. My brother said quietly, just sign it, Claire. I looked at him. For the first time in years, I finally understand what I'm looking at. He didn't respond. Because he knew I wasn't confused anymore, I looked at the lawyer. If I sign this today, what changes? He answered honestly. Everything finalizes. I nodded. And if I don't, he said, then it remains open. I turned slightly toward my family and said, so this entire thing depends on me deciding whether or not I want to close a story I didn't write. No one answered, because that was exactly what it was. I picked up the pen on the table, not signing, just holding it, and said, I didn't come back for this. My mother said quickly, then what did you come back for? I looked at her, and for the first time in 10 years of silence between us, I answered honestly. I didn't come back. Pause. I just stopped disappearing. The room went quiet. Even my brother didn't speak. Even my father didn't try to correct it. The lawyer gently closed the folder in front of me again, not ending anything, just waiting. Because now everyone understood the same thing at the same time. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. It was about whether I still existed in their story, or whether I was finally allowed to stop being used as the missing piece in it. So I want to ask you something. If someone builds a system that depends on you without ever telling you you're part of it, are you responsible for keeping it running? And honestly, if you were in my position, would you sign it just to end it? Or would you leave it exactly where it is, unfinished? Because that's the part nobody in that room was ready for. And lastly, if you like the story, please do not leave without subscribing. It motivates us to bring more stories for you. Thanks for watching, folks.